Hi everyone, my name is Shannon Castle. I'm the organizer of FMA Freelance Fest and an independent journalist. I want to really quickly thank our sponsors, SPJ Florida and SPJ Region 3. We really appreciate you. Thank you for all your support. FMA Freelance Fest has been such a lovely endeavor. I'm really happy that we could have you guys here, and thank you for supporting it. We are here today with Alex Lanciel. She's a documentarian. She's the co-founder of Scale Storytelling, which is a visual storytelling production company that has a focus on nonprofits. She used to be a video producer at the Boston Globe, where she won an Emmy Award for editing on a story about sexual assault survivors. Her work has also been seen on HBO, in the Boston Globe, The Today Show, and at the Center for Public Integrity. If you have any questions today for her, feel free to send them my way, and we will ask them at the end. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So go right ahead, Alex. Thanks for being here.
Okay, hi guys. Like Shannon said, my name is Alex Lanciel. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I co-founded a storytelling production company with my partner, Jim Tuttle, who's also a photographer. I'm more of a cinematographer, just to let you guys know. I graduated with my master's and bachelor's at ASU's Cronkite School in 2014 and started working from there. And while I was working for the Boston Globe, my partner Jim was traveling frequently to Liberia for both editorial and nonprofit clients, and so together we'd always talked about making our own production company and starting something. So we decided to move to Phoenix, where I've got ties with ASU, and the living costs are much lower, something to think about when you want to start a business. And founded Scale Storytelling in 2016. We focus on visual campaigns and documentary films for organizations committed to social impact, mostly in international development. We've been pretty successful so far. We landed a large USAID project in Nigeria. We work with small nonprofits in Liberia, and we've also been doing some educational consulting for as editors for News 21 at ASU, which we're starting next week. And that was kind of coincidental and cool because that's where Jim and I met. So a little bit about what I do for the company. I currently act as the business head of our company. I manage all our financial accounts, our logistics, our project organization, contracts, and scheduling. Before I get into starting up a business, I just want to go over a couple of key things that you should think about in basically every decision that you make. So the first thing is, okay, this is what we're going to cover, sorry. So we're going to cover things that will inform all your business decisions, organization, like how to organize your back end and what to do to establish, keeping a track of all your finances and accounting. And then we're going to talk just briefly about contracts and budgeting for them and scheduling your invoices. Okay, so the intro, sorry, I excuse the weird face on my photo there from the flying the drone, but I was very focused. So the first thing you want to do is kind of get a head start on finding work by establishing a niche that fits for you. So you want to think about what contacts you have in certain areas. Like if you work a lot with environmental groups, maybe that's a good place to start. Or if you do a lot of editorial work, maybe you should start there. For us, it was really Jim's contacts in Liberia and him working with nonprofits that kind of like put us in that place to have a head start. So you just want to like give yourself that head start by gearing your business toward contracts and experience that you have. The hardest thing about freelance is not doing the work, but finding the work. So just think about that, and then work on establishing contacts before all else. Before you worry about managing your finances, you need to make sure you have an income. And then just keep in mind the rates and budgets of your target clientele. Like, for instance, we have really large USAID contracts that have big budgets, and we have smaller nonprofits that could always use a discount. So we keep that in mind whenever we're sending them an estimate or anything like that. Okay, and then branding. So you want to use your skills and your talents as selling points. Always think, if I were looking to hire me, would I think of this as a strength? Think about what makes you different, and then use those as selling points. For example, being a small company isn't necessarily bad. If it's just you, you're more nimble, flexible, you have less red tape for clients to deal with. So always find positives in your negatives. So when we did scale, I'm just going to switch to our website here. We basically have all of these little blurbs about what makes us different and unique, like flexibility. Our nimble team can travel locally or internationally on short notice. So that's something that could be perceived as, oh, you're just two people, how can we handle our contract? But we say, no, like, we can fly anywhere you want, basically at a moment's notice. And then just like keep the things that make you different and use them as selling points. All right, back to the keynote. All right. All right, so moving into organization, the back end of your business. You want to keep track of everything. You're running a business, you need to keep track of every expense you have relating to business. And when I was starting out, I used Google Drive to organize everything. It's very helpful. We have 4 main folders, stuff for administrative things, stuff that has branding, items like our logo and anything to do with our website. Contracts is basically everything we put all of our client-specific things into, and then finance and accounting, where we have like monthly reports, annual operating costs, expenses, anything like that. So I'm just going to briefly show you this folder that would kind of like help you guys keep organized. So this is our Google Drive folder. Basically, you know, as you go into them, you have different stuff. Insurance, you know, we have all of our logo stuff, anything like that. Contracts, we keep a list of all of our current contracts here. I would go into them, but they contain sensitive information, so I'm not going to do that. And then finance, which has like all of our monthly reports and anything to do with budgeting or taxes. So just think it's kind of helpful to keep organized in this way and just make sure that you just keep track of everything. If you are confused about how to organize something, write it down. Write down all of your thoughts, and eventually you should get somewhere where you have like a working Google Doc. Like when we started our business, we started with this Google Doc called Strategy and basically said everything that we want to do. And that's something that was very helpful. Okay. So establishing a business. Did we finish all of this? Oh yeah, must have spreadsheets. So one thing we find really helpful to have is an equipment inventory. Basically, we include all of our serial numbers. If you're a photo video person, that is essential. Keep a list of all of your equipment that you have, and then just think about how much you could sell it for, so that's its like value, and think about how much it would cost to replace it. And keep those in columns, and then also look on borrowlenses.com to find an equipment rental rate that works for that piece of equipment. It may change from time to time, but it's good to keep all of this in one working document. Contracts, like I mentioned, we have a spreadsheet of all of our contracts that are happening right now, and basically like how much we've invoiced for and how much is happening right now. Annual operating costs, I'll get to that a little bit later, but basically that's like what it takes to run your business. It's your overhead and your salaries. And we keep a list of all of our current clients just in case we need to send that out an email or anything like that. And then we keep monthly reports of all of our expenses, which I'll go over a little bit later. Okay, so this is kind of in the weeds, but I thought it might be helpful. So establishing a business is different in every state. Some states are more expensive than others to establish a business in, but basically you want to kind of decide what structure your business is going to take. If it's just you, you want to think about either a sole proprietorship or an LLC. If it's 2 people, a partnership, an LLC, or a corporation. Usually when you're first starting out, you want to do something that's not so hard to keep up with. My dad happens to be a pretty savvy business guy, and he said, you know, starting an LLC has formation requirements, there's fees, even though there's no personal liability, and there is with a partnership, it makes it a lot easier because you don't really have income right now. So there's nothing really that they could go after as far as like suing you or anything like that. So if it makes you more comfortable, obviously form an LLC or a corporation. But personally, we started as a partnership, and it's the easiest to form. Your taxes pass through to your personal taxes. There's no annual fees, there's no requirements, but you do have personal liability, which basically means that if someone were to come after you in some way, they could go after your personal assets in addition to your business assets. But eventually we might work toward forming an LLC, but for now we have a partnership. So basically, to register your business as a sole proprietorship or a partnership, which is what I have experience in, so it's what I'll go over, you need a doing business as name or a trade name. You register that usually with your registrar, who I think is in the Secretary of State's office, but I can double check for that. Anyway, you want your doing business as name, and that's everything tax related is going to come under that name. So for us, it was Scale Storytelling. Once you have that, you register for an EIN under that name. An EIN is an employer identification number. That's something with the IRS. So it takes like 24 hours to get this EIN. You basically just like send them all your info, and they send you an EIN back, and that's it. It's up to 24 hours, but I think we got ours back in like an hour. And then you just want to check in your area. For us, we had to file a at-home business license with the town of Gilbert where we live. But make sure you check all your licensing and permits that you might need in your city or your state. And then establish an agreement or a business plan. Basically, this is the document that shows anyone looking for legal information how you're running your business. So if you're a sole proprietor, include things like, okay, I'm gonna pay myself this much, or this is how much capital I'm bringing into my business at the beginning, or things like, this is how many meetings we're gonna have. I mean, you don't have to have meetings, but if you're doing an LLC, you do. So things like that. Basically, all of those things you need to open a business bank account, which I will go over the pros and cons of doing, but I think is really helpful. And then you'll want to get, if you have really big contracts or you expect big contracts, like stuff with universities or big government companies, you definitely need liability insurance. We use Hiscox liability insurance. It is something that they will ask you to prove that you have before they pay you. So you need to have these things in place. And also, it's just like a good thing to have in general, because if something were to go wrong, then you're not liable for that. Especially as a photo video person, that can be extremely helpful. And then a really good resource to go on for starting a small business that will go into specific states and everything is SBA.gov. It's the Small Business Association. They'll basically tell you everything and give you tips for everything you need to start, and establish a business. Okay, moving on to finance. So what to keep track of for taxes. I know taxes can seem kind of scary, but when you're starting out, just keep all your receipts and use Google spreadsheets to create monthly reports, and make sure to keep track of who paid for what. And that includes like mileage. So you want to keep track of, like, if you drove to a cafe for breakfast and you were working, then driving back is mileage that you can deduct from your taxes. Whatever you had at the cafe is stuff that you can deduct for taxes. Just keep track of everything so that later you can separate everything and put that into TurboTax or whatever you use for taxes really easily. Examples of deductible expenses: office supplies, software like the Creative Cloud or Microsoft Word, your website upkeep like hosting or domain registration, any equipment that you might have. You can deduct a certain amount of rent from taxes. So if you work out of your home, you can basically figure out the square footage where you do only business, and deduct whatever the percentage of square footage that is. That's the amount of rent you can deduct from taxes. You can also deduct utilities like Wi-Fi, any insurance that you might have, like gear insurance or liability insurance, and then travel meals. any automobile expenses. If you're out on a story and you eat lunch and whoever doesn't reimburse you, but you still want to keep track of it so that you can deduct it later. And then any charitable donations that you have. So just keep track of everything. It's really helpful to keep track of all your meals, especially. You don't think about it, but when you're running a business, you're basically working 24/7. So you can deduct a lot of meals that you might be working on something, or meeting with someone, or having a phone call with someone. Any time you talk or think about business, you can basically deduct a meal expense. So just keep track of all of them, and it's really helpful. Okay, and then keeping a separate bank account for business. So we talked a little bit about this and what you need to start one. The pros are it's really easy to keep business and personal expenses separate, and you can pay yourself consistently to easily keep track later for taxes. Like if you're in a partnership, we pay ourselves using guaranteed payments, which is like an account in our QuickBooks. And basically we just have to go back and see, okay, I made this much with guaranteed payments, and that tells us how much we might owe for taxes later. Some of the cons are sometimes banks require a really high minimum balance. Like if it's just you and you don't have a ton of capital that you're working with, you might want to stay away from that and just kind of like keep track of it and separate it out, with your own personal account. And then I would definitely subscribe to QuickBooks. If you have a business bank account, just get regular Intuit QuickBooks. If you don't, QuickBooks Self-Employed helps you kind of like separate that stuff. I think it's like $5 a month. It's really cheap, and you can keep track of all your expenses in a way that's going to be really helpful for taxes. And then if you invest in a good accountant, it's really helpful. We got an accountant that happens to work with a lot of photo and video people, and so she knew exactly how to set up our QuickBooks. We basically, paid her like a couple $100 to set up our QuickBooks, and then you kind of had her show me how to keep track of the books. It's pretty simple to keep track of your own books, so I wouldn't recommend having someone go in and be a bookkeeper for you. You can do it yourself. And then just have your accountant do your business taxes yearly. If something's going wrong, she or he can tell you, like, hey, you should be doing this when you're accounting, or you should be doing this when you're bookkeeping and whatnot. So it's really helpful because there's a lot of accounts that QuickBooks kind of like just starts itself, and it's really helpful to have someone go in and kind of explain like how to run it, basically. And then you want to find out your cost of doing business. This is going to impact like what rates you charge people. So basically start out by figuring out your monthly costs, your personal monthly costs, and what salary you need to cover them, and like also set aside some for savings. It's extremely important. I mean, your salary basically is your livelihood. So make sure you're paying yourself a reasonable amount, or thinking about paying yourself a reasonable amount. If it sounds crazy, don't think about it that way. Just start it out and be like, okay, I want to make however much money. I live in New York and I have, thousands of dollars of rent per month, and need to cover that. So just think about, what makes sense for you. Then add up all of your estimated business expenses, including software, any equipment that you might buy, things like your email, like Google, I know costs like $5 a month if you're doing a business email, and your website expenses, basically all those expenses that we talked about earlier. You want to add up all of those plus your salary and figure out what your annual operating costs are. And don't forget taxes off of your employment. It's good to overestimate, but basically any salary that you're paying yourself, make sure you're not forgetting the taxes that need to come out of it. And now plug and chug. Your annual operating costs divided by the amount of working days that you expect to have per year is your minimum rate. That's the rate that you need to get out of bed, basically. You don't necessarily want to charge that rate, but that's the rate that you could charge if you need to. And then figure out what you need to sustain your business. Does your rate make sense? Do your annual operating costs make sense? Basically, think about your average contract price. If your average contract is $500, but you have like 100 of them over the course of a year, look at that number and see if it makes sense with your annual operating costs. Divide your annual operating costs by your average contract price. See how many contracts you need to sustain yourself, and does it sound realistic? Maybe you don't get 100 contracts a year. Maybe you get 5 contracts a year. So adjust your salary and your costs accordingly to something that seems doable for you. You don't want to like overshoot in your first business, in your first year of your business, and then not be able to sustain yourself later on. So if it's just you, remember that everything that you're putting into your business is your own. It's your business equity. So even if it seems like, oh, I'm only making $10,000 a year or $20,000 a year, but just think about, oh, but I have all this big business equity that can show on taxes later, can show on any credit later, so it does help. And it might change later. Okay. Establishing rates. So news organizations usually have their own rates. You should talk to others in Riot Girls or any other groups out there to get an idea of what they are. And make sure what they're offering is standard in the industry. If you ask around and the New York Times pays however much and then the Cincinnati Enquirer pays a different amount, you want to like maybe negotiate with them to see like, hey, like, why is your rate lower, right? Why is your, why is it the way it is? And half the time, like, people are expecting you to negotiate, and a lot of us don't even know that you're supposed to do that. So I would just ask. It's not going to lose you the job if you're uncomfortable with the rate. Be flexible when you're free. So if you've got nothing going on, unfortunately, you kind of have to take jobs that might not pay you as much or that you might not want to do. But if it's money, it's money. And in a business, you kind of have to, like, you pick and choose carefully when you're really busy so that you don't break promises to clients that you have, or you know that you can get everything done. But when you're free, you kind of have to be flexible to take whatever comes your way. And then if you're thinking about saying no, just think about these things. If the rate is below your minimum, weigh the other benefits of doing the job. Like, is it going to look really good on your portfolio? I know that's like a classic thing that people say to try to get you to work for free, but really think about that. Don't work for free ever, but if it's something that's like lower than what you'd normally take, think about, is it going to help my portfolio? Is it going to help my business advertising or a client relationship? Like, is this a client relationship that can help me later on? If they're new and their budget is low, you could say, oh yeah, like, I have this new client discount that's going to be perfect for this project. Like, we can do that. And then maybe later on your rates can change with them. Or in the same regard, if they want to go at a lower rate, just be like, oh yeah, like, I know you're going to give me repeat work. Maybe we could like sign all of those contracts and get like 5 in the running, basically, but at a lower rate. Jim, when he was first starting out, did that with one of our clients. They wanted to negotiate a lower rate, and he basically came back and said, sure, like, we can do a low rate as long as you give me 10 projects. And never, if you have to say no, never say they're not paying enough or anything like that. I know it might sound like simple, but always say you're too busy. You don't want to say like, oh, I don't want to do your project, I don't want to do this, or I don't really do that. Just be like, no, I'm actually way too busy. I'm too bogged down with other projects right now. We've got so many things coming at us right now, stuff like that. And then always refer them to someone who might need the work. Because you never know, like, someone's rates could be a lot lower, or maybe someone didn't have as much business as you coming their way. So if you want to say no, always send them to someone who you know could use it. Okay, budgeting for contracts. This is a little picture from one of our most recent jobs in Nigeria. So you want to make sure you include materials as well as your labor costs. And that includes stuff like hard drives, equipment rental, even if it's your own equipment, like photo, video people. You want to be charging for stuff like that because in the long run, it'll help you pay for more equipment, and it's also more profit toward your business. It's an industry standard thing. Look on borrowlenses.com or your local camera rental place to see what their rates are, and charge people what makes sense for your own equipment. But definitely always charge for equipment rental each day that you use it. It is a standard practice. And then you also want to include like travel costs, and if you are traveling to a foreign country, include visa costs or medical evacuation insurance if you're going to a really rough place. You should basically keep everything in here. One thing that we forgot to charge recently for was transcriptions, and we had to eat that cost. We get everything transcribed through a transcription service called SpeechPad, and that was kind of a big chunk of money to throw away, but now we'll know for later. Don't forget anything on your budget. And basically, your rate should account for your overhead and your taxes, so always keep that in mind. You don't need to bog down the client with fees that account for things like your Creative Cloud or anything. That's accounted for in your rate. Basically, the materials or stuff that are projects is specific, like what equipment you're using, any travel costs, hard drives that you're using for that specific project. So don't bog them down with fees. And then it is standard practice to mark up any subcontractor rates you might have by like 10% or 5 to 10%. So if you are hiring like another cinematographer or a sound engineer, or if you're hiring an editor to edit your story or something like that, you can always mark up those rates by a little bit just as a contractor thing. Okay, and scheduling your invoices. So you want to establish a payment schedule with your client up front in the contract that they sign so that there's no surprises either way. Basically, decide what's going to work for you. Like if you need to pay yourself next month, you might want to ask for a deposit up front if it makes sense. Now, usually you don't want to ask for a deposit if it's something that's like time and materials. So if you're charging by however much time you use, you want to kind of ask for invoices throughout the project as you go, and ask for them as you complete like milestones or time that you're spending. And make sure you're accounting for 30 days for your client to pay you, because that's pretty normal. If you're doing a full project rate, like if you're saying, oh, I'm going to produce a video for you for $5,000, you can ask for a deposit up front if it makes sense. Like, oh, I need a 50% deposit for the cost of the project, just to cover like a time. You can say like it's booking my time basically. But as always, decide what works for you. A lot of people, I have friends that charge 50% up front. I have friends that charge nothing up front and invoice all at the end. But you just kind of want to think about what's going to work for you and when you need to pay yourself. But just keep all these things in mind so that it's no surprise later. Freelancing is difficult. Sometimes you're sitting around waiting for a check, but once that check arrives, it's always a nice little bonus. And so that's the end of my keynote. I just wanted to say running your business is really challenging and taxing, literally, and really scary, but it's also personally been the most rewarding work I've done. It's outside of my comfort zone, but it's completely our own success. Any profit that we make, any contract that we get, any check that we get in the mail, I know is all due to our hard work. So just don't be afraid to fail and envision what the future can look like. How many employees are you going to have in the future? Think about what your business looks like at its most successful, and the roadmap will become much clearer. So, okay, that's it, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so thank you so much, Alex. That was great. And sorry if you guys hear anything in the background. The lawn guys just showed up, so it's a little loud here. Real quick, so our first question for you is, you did what a lot of people are sometimes afraid to do, which is that you guys chose to work for yourselves, and even though you had the opportunity to have like a full-time position. I mean, what would you tell someone who wants to do that but is afraid and maybe is like, a lit feeling, because you were just saying, you guys have had success and that's the best feeling. What kind of encouragement would you give someone who may not be as ready to do that as they think they are?
Sure. So to talk about that, I kind of have to talk about what my job at the Globe was like. Not to disparage the Globe, I love them so much; they are great. And I had an incredible experience working for them. But at the end of the day, it is a newspaper, and newspapers are, kind of up in the air right now. They don't pay a lot of money to their employees, and I got to a point where I was really struggling to live in Boston at what they were paying me, and also not really loving where what I was doing, video journalism, was going at the time, which is not to say I don't love documentary filmmaking. I do, and we hope to get to a point where we can produce our own documentaries separate from scale down the road. But just this like clickbait kind of let's make glorified graphic videos for Facebook kind of thing bogged me down a little bit. And we kind of got to a point where I was like, well, if I'm going to be broke or living beyond my means, I might as well be doing something that I really want to do. I knew I wanted to travel internationally and that it was going to take a really long time for me to work my way up to that level in editorial. And I knew that I kind of wanted to start something new. And we just kind of jumped into it. It was really scary, and you kind of have to think, okay, what's my fallback if this doesn't work out? Like for us, it was like, oh, if we have a really slow month, we'll just drive for Uber or something, or we'll pick up like an odd job here and there. But I would just say like it's never too soon to start what you actually want to do, because it gets you ahead. You know what I mean? I'm only 24, but starting this business has been really successful, and it's been just a whirlwind, and I'm so much happier than I was working for someone else. And yeah, that's all I can say about that.
No, yeah. And in terms of how you guys set up all your finances and everything, I mean, in order to have everything in your Google Drive, do you guys pay for like Google Business?
We do, yeah. That was actually the first expense that we had. Was we basically figured out our name first, and then started a Google account for business. Basically, all you need for that is you need your domain name, and then you can be so-and-so at, we're at skillstories.com. You don't, if you want to just have like a Gmail, it's totally free. I mean, you can start a Google Drive that way, but it's, if you want your domain name to be, in your email, you have to pay for that. It's $5 a person. So we pay $10 a month, which is not bad. It's like the same as Netflix. So.
And I guess, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not really. I mean, I think we went through a lot of stuff. If you guys have any questions, you can always find me on our website. You can email alex@scalestories.com. And then, also follow us on social, because we're a new company and we would love to have some more followers. We're on Instagram and Facebook at the moment. So, yeah, that's basically it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so, so much for your time. This was wonderful. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We have one more talk today, so definitely come back for that. I'll be on negotiating contracts, which is definitely essential for any freelancer. And thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you guys all have a great day. Thanks again, Alex.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.